Well, hello everybody. My name is Brian Scholes, an event manager with AusIMM, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar, How to Achieve High Present Value in Project Delivery from Tactics through to Collaboration and Investment in Human Capital. I would like to thank you for attending the live webinar today and for those who are viewing the recording. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone is on mute today to avoid presenter distraction and noise feedback. We will have time for questions during the presentation. Should you want to ask any questions, you can type them into the question box available to you on your side panel. A copy of the webinar will be sent via email to everyone who is registered in the next few weeks. We also have a quick exit survey when you leave the webinar. On to today's webinar. In collaboration with our valued partner, Ausenco, we're hosting a series of webinars shedding light on the changing landscape of mineral processing projects through a project lifecycle and sharing best practice on how to achieve optimal outcomes at each stage of the cycle. In today's webinar, Matt Pyle will facilitate a panel discussion on how to achieve high net present value in project delivery. Matt will provide a high-level summary of the theory so far and introduce today's panelists. Over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Brian, and welcome everyone who's with us today or viewing afterwards. For those that have been to a few of our webinars, welcome back. For those that haven't, welcome to the first one, and you can go back and review the old ones at your discretion, I suppose. I'm quite excited about today. We've got a slightly different format for this one, where I've got probably 100 years plus of the project execution experience in this virtual room with me, and we'll be talking about how to achieve high net present value in project execution. And I'll with the next slide. So those that haven't been with us on the previous webinars, we're stepping through a series here where we're looking at an overview webinar followed by talking a bit about studies. We had a webinar where we presented how to design cost-effective and high value-add projects, and in this webinar we're really taking that into the execution field and how to, I guess, capture that value and deliver it in a way where the project is successful. We'll follow up this webinar with a final in the series, which will be how we operate and optimize projects on an ongoing basis. So today with me, I've got Brendan Peterson, who's our Global Head of Projects, Peter Mayle, who's a Project Director, and Chris Morley, Principal Process Engineer. And look, I'll let these guys introduce themselves. So Brendan, if you want to go first, followed by Peter and then Chris.
Thanks, Matt. Hello, everybody. Let me just put it out there straight away, that 100 years of experience, I'd have to be the minor contributor to that. You can tell by my youthful good looks that I'd be the minor party, so we'll just put that out there. Matt, by way of introduction, I've been a recent member joining the Ausenco team, probably around about 2 months. My background, probably about 30 years in the mining and the construction industry, moving through from tier 1 contractors and looking after construction and maintenance and contract mining operations. So I think certainly being able to keen to share some experiences, because if you've spent that amount of time, there's scars and there's learnings. So these series are all about us being able to share those with everybody who's listening.
All right, I suppose I'll go next. So thanks everyone for attending. Yeah, I've been in construction for a good 30 plus years. Very similar background to Brendan. Originally started in mining and had various infrastructure projects, mining projects, oil and gas, and tried to specialise in project management over the last 15 years, I suppose. Yeah, so that's my history.
Yeah, Peter's currently managing a $2 billion project for us at the moment in South America, and I think some of those references will come up today. Chris.
Yes, hello everybody. I've been in the industry for close on half a century now, and started off back in Zambia in the early 70s, where one of my first tasks was to commission the tailings leach plant. And of course, being fresh out of uni only for a year or two, this was quite a challenge for me. But that experience did set me off on the path that I've been on ever since, which is design and commissioning. I've progressed through quite a lot of fairly large and quite a few small full design and commission projects. And since joining Ausenco in 2008, I've been operating as a sort of internal consultant with our technical solutions group. And hopefully I'll still be here and with Ausenco at the end of next year when I bring up my half century.
That's a good score in most games. Unfortunately, New South Wales basically put that on us last night. But anyway, let's not talk too much about that. It's depressing when you're in the northern state. So we're talking about how to achieve high net present value in project execution. Thanks everyone for your introductions. You'll see we've got a fair bit of horsepower on the call today. So this is an interactive session. I'll be asking a series of questions, and I've got a chat box up to the side here. So please feel free to ask any questions that come to mind. If you have any follow-up questions afterwards, please feel free to reach out, and we'll be more than happy to get back to you on those as well after the webinar, or for those that are watching it recorded. So we're talking about how to achieve high net present value in project execution, and the mantra on the left-hand side is summarising where we landed after a lot of discussion on this topic, I guess in preparation for this panel discussion, and it's really one about people. So I thought I would just show this initially to give some context behind some of the things we'll be talking about, but it is that in any good project or any good problem-solving exercise, you need to listen, challenge, align in a bit of a cycle. And really, what that's about is getting agreement and understanding between parties. It's a trust-building exercise. Once you have trust, you can deliver. So it's a good mantra for people working in teams. It's a good mantra for a marriage. And in fact, Greg Lane, who you might know, who put this together, says that he seems to think challenging is a key part of his relationship. I can tell you, if this is my relationship, I make the challenge part pretty small. But the point is that it's a good way to execute projects and work in teams. So we're talking about people, processes, systems, technical aspects, and how we get the balance right between all those things. Like I said, please feel free to ask questions as we go. So look, I might start. I'll hide this for now so that you can see everyone's face a little bit more clearly, and we might show a few photos later on. But I'll start with you, Brendan. High net present value in projects. What does that mean to you from a project's perspective?
Thanks, Matt. I think it's a curious title, and I think it's smart to look at it this way. Until we take Ausenco on, what I think a lot of listeners are probably involved in here is delivering projects, and until we can find out how robots are going to create and build a copper concentrator in the middle of Peru, we can only deliver what we do as a business with humans and people. And people need teams. They're social beings. We work in teams. Teams need leaders. And leaders need structures and ways of doing things. And what I think is interesting about the topic of high net present value, we'd all know, and you've got capitals against that, NPV, that's a financial term. It's well known. We all know how to calculate it. Our chief accountants' decisions are made on the net present value of options. It's a algorithm that looks at the cash outflows and the cash inflows over time and reduces it back to a number, allows us to make decisions. So it's a well-defined and it's a mathematical financial concept, and that's pretty good. What we're doing here today is probably linking that with the people side of things, the leadership side of things, the organizational design side of things, teamwork, and the areas that I'd like to add some observation on is that if you want a great project outcome at the end of the day, then your investment in the team and the leadership and the people in the team, you got to go early. And if you go early and if you get outcomes, little short wins along the way early, that early recognition of benefits just magnifies benefits later on down the track as well, and because they accumulate into your overall success. Now, it might sound a bit high level, but I think we've seen from time to time good early investment in leaders and their teams. Finding those initial wins and early wins is far better doing upfront than when you're in trouble. You know, a big intervention program at a later date, or maybe you're too busy up front, so you kick the can down the road and you think about it maybe, you know, 30% of the way into a project. So I like why I think that topic's interesting is because you think about what you have to do and when to create that leadership group, the team to follow the leaders, and then obviously everything that flows from what the team do.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Peter, do you think we're successful at delivering projects as an industry?
Well, yes and no. Look, with some of the stats out there at the moment and some of the papers being written at the moment is showing that up to or excess of 60% of projects are failing worldwide, and that means time and money. I would suggest that what Brendan was just saying is absolutely correct. The front end of projects seems to be left behind when we start projects, and it is resonating throughout the industry. And the more projects we go to, the more we see that. You know, I mean, we are delivering a very successful project in Peru right at the present time, and I'm lucky enough to be the leader of that. And it's had a lot of work up the front end of this project to get the back end right, and to me that's absolutely critical.
So, what are the key areas to focus on up front in a project? What are the attributes? What does the project need to do to be successful? Brendan, do you want to start with that one?
Yep, I'll offer my views, and then Peter and Chris can pick them up. Now, there is a body of work out there called project management, and one would argue that this has been researched and studied no end. And I think on a quick look yesterday, if you Google the word project management, you get about 3.6 billion hits in about 0.72 of a second. So there's no shortage of research, literature, opinion, and all that sort of thing. So, and within all that, there's gold. There's some fantastic nuggets of stuff. But how a company or how any particular project team waves their way through all of that and finds what's right for them, I think it is a real leadership challenge. And I think everyone will probably pick a couple of different things to suit themselves, or particularly the project that they're looking at. But what I want to share with you is, I guess, what I sort of, when I look at whether it's a business or a project team, I'm sort of looking for sort of 5 things. And what I wanted to touch on them. And the first one is what I call the MVPs. So the first one is our most valuable people. You start off with that. And it's not necessarily just the project director or the project manager and their direct reports. You know, you look for the top 5. You look for the top most valuable people in a job. And we all normally know who that is. It's typically, you hear about it, you know the person that everyone goes to when they're in trouble. And the test is on those MVPs as a leader or a leader's leader is, are you looking after them, right? Have you invested in them? Have you coached them, developed them, give them career pathing, look after them, communicate with them on another level? Because if you haven't got your MVPs performing at the best, that's a critical problem with your project. It'll fail or struggle somewhere. So that's one of the things. And I often will write down, when I look at a big team around the table, I'll write down who the 5 MVPs are and just watch and try to help, because I know they'll get me over the line at the end of the day. Second thing I then look for is what I call the MVRs. I hate to use an acronym, but hey, most of us are probably engineers, so we probably get it right. That's the most critical roles, most valued roles. Now, those roles on a project aren't necessarily just the project director or just the finance director. You know in your heart which ones have got to work for the project's work. If you're a technical-based service operation, there's going to be a system in there. And the test on the MVRs is, have you given them the right tools to be really good? And it doesn't matter the person. The person might go in and out. They might have to change the lifestyle choice or whatever. But the role that plays in a job, has it got the right tools to work? Because if it hasn't, that's another major drama. And you'll find it'll unplug your job, your project. I always look for new members. My third area is I look for new members. You know, how quickly do they get orientated? How quickly do they sort of understand the vibe and what to do? Because two things happen. One is if they're not sort of brought on board or they become productive quick enough, they'll just drag down the team because they won't know what to do. Not their fault at all. And so they can have a very big latency impact or negative impact on the progress of a job. So watching new people come in and places where Pete's worked, you know, you often do have quite a bit of new membership because of just the location and the lifestyle impacts and things like that. So always have a look at your new members. You know, did they hit the ground running? Because if not, then they're wasting someone else's time. So invest in the new team. I talk about accountability, the fourth point, the look and the feel of accountability. It's a high level topic, but I look at it as accountability. You've got to have two things: clarity and transparency. Clarity, do people know their roles and what they've got to do? Transparency, is information there, available, touch, feel, on the walls, all that sort of stuff. When that's around, you can get a feel for, does this team, whatever they are, technical outcomes or administrative outcomes, do they know their goals and do they know what they have to do and what they can rely on others to do? So that accountability culture is the fourth thing. The last thing is I look for silo busting. And silo busting to me is all projects need groups. They need silos, they need lines and what's it. You've got to do that. You've got to do it to manage complexity. But is there lateral connectivity? Multiple groups meeting to project solve things. So I look for, are there little silo busting style projects and vibe in a team? So that might not be the top 5 someone else looks at. And I'm not saying mine are right. That's not a silver bullet. But I think when I try to look at the vibe and the progress and the chance whether this team is going to get, projects are hard things, right? They start from a zero base and they have to finish. You don't get to take as long as you like. I look for those sort of things because that then, if you've got the right people on the team, they'll deliver.
What do you guys reckon about that, Peter and Chris? I mean, you haven't heard that before, quite in that way, I think, from Brendan. So does that resonate with what you guys have seen in your projects?
Oh, most definitely. You know, Brendan hit on a very good point in regards to you know, when new people come in to projects, is if you're running silos and there's no interaction between these silos, then you know, you've got to get a community-based project, what I call a community-based project, and that's not only internal, it's external as well, right? The project has to come together as a community, one team, and we know that we've got all the different departments and all of that, but the communication between those is part of becoming a community, you know, and we spend a lot of time in Ausenco making sure that we come together as a community. I mean, we've proven that on a couple of major projects that we've done, one that I'm trying to finish now, and another one in Peru quite a few years ago. But when you talk to the people that have been involved in those projects, it is all about becoming that community, and the outcome is self-resolve, right? So, you know, we all go to work to earn money and to be self-resolved, let's say. So, you know, all too often I see on projects now, and look, I've been to many projects that are, I've been sent to projects that haven't performed as well as they should, and some pretty major ones. And one of the first thing that comes out is exactly what Brendan said, is silos that aren't communicating between each other, you know. So, you know, that's my take on some very good points that Brendan just brought up then.
Thanks, Peter. There's a couple of points in. We've had a couple of questions come through, and one I think I'll ask in this context. Peter, you're talking about how teams must sort of work together in the same space with the same objectives on a project. But Chris, I might put this one to you. The question comes from Andrew Bevan, and he's asking, how important is it to have study team members being part of an execution team? And I might extend that a little bit further from how important is it to sort of align the study work with execution and then into commissioning, which is your area.
Yes, absolutely. If I can just start by endorsing what Brendan and Peter just said, we talk about project teams, and the important part of that phrase is team. There's no I in team, you know, and team or community is the only way you're going to get things done. So that talks to silo busting, you know, community, the whole business. So absolutely aligned there with you guys. Regarding the progression of a project from study through to commissioning, obviously, to my mind at least, it's got to be helpful to have continuity from the study through detailed design into construction and commissioning. The simple continuity thread and the familiarity with the process and what is trying to be achieved is extremely helpful. It's not always possible, and that's the difficulty. But in my previous employments, certainly we've tried to ensure that the guys, certainly the process guys, who are engaged on the study go into detailed design, and they are the ones who almost have to be on the commissioning team. That has always been the intent, so that the guys not only contribute the knowledge and familiarity of the design to the commissioning process, but they also, importantly, learn what works and what doesn't work, so they can take that through to the next project. So the continuity issue there is particularly important from a process perspective, to take all the way through, if it's possible, if you can afford those resources, through from study all the way through to commissioning. That will secure, I think, the best outcome process-wise.
The knowledge all the way through. Yeah. Yep, I do agree with that. There's a couple of questions here. Thanks for sending them in. One from Michael Conan-Davies and another from Kevin Fiedler, and they're along similar lines. And we're in talking about teams. Obviously, on any project, the owner is a key component of that, and the owner's teams. What Michael's question is, what part do owners play in the failure? Kevin's question is, how do you manage the interface between the client and the engineer or project executor? I'll throw the question open to anyone, but I guess the question is, what's the best way to manage that interface, to summarize those two in one?
If I can put it back into, if I can put it back into what we were just talking about, is you know, if you talk about team, community, is a project. That includes client, external parties, everyone who's involved. So the client plays a huge part in all of this. You know, we've had experiences not so long ago with clients, and the change of leadership in the client's team that has made a huge impact on the project overall. So yeah, the client definitely has a big influence over how projects are delivered.
Is that a silo factor, do you think, or a constraining the project issue, or what do you think it comes down to?
Well, in a team, you always have to have leaders, but you know, one of the things that I suppose has come out of a recent project is the client. Let's say the first part of the project is the client was a traditional client where you know, you're the contractor, you do what I tell you to do. But that was briefed across their whole team, and no matter what position in their team, that's the way they thought. When the new leadership came, we were developed as one team. What was interesting is the performance change in the project when if you go back to what Brendan was saying before in regards to clarity of roles and clarity and clear direction, when you come together as one team and understand the leadership, understand your position, understand how you take direction, where direction goes, how the project dynamic changes.
It's a issue of collaboration almost in a sense, and breaking down those silos. Brendan, do you want to provide your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm aligned with Pete's comment. The view I'd offer here is that one of the setting up for success is compensation models, risk transfer. There are real issues that owners have to deal with in regards to warranties, insurances, capital risk, where they lie, and it's a complex field for them to get through. Some are often constrained that they can only procure a project in a lump sum risk transferred environment. That could be because of financing, it could be for whatever reason. Others can find a blend, or others might have the luxury from a cash flow basis, a balance sheet, that they may be able to really develop a team and a community, a quasi-alliance style of delivery. And I think there's been many excellent projects done under successful risk transfer. Irrespective of the compensation arrangements, there is no doubt still a layer of silo busting, collaborative working that still can happen. But the more risk transfer that moves from one party to another, it makes it harder. That's all. It shouldn't extinguish the opportunity. It just makes it harder, because when you've got a financial obligation, you can't run away from it, whether you're the owner or the contractor. And so you can't take on the obligation of the other party. You contractually, it's just not there. So, but I do believe that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I do fear though that, and I think if you run your eye over the infrastructure sector, an area that I've had a bit of visibility in the last few years, the risk transfer nature of from owners through to contractors who are either just buying projects or just want to fill their books and haven't got the capacity, they have a high percentage chance of failure. And so in a way, they might need more work done to align the parties, but you cannot get away from that commercial risk transfer. So I call that out as just a complicating factor. But I think we'd all have great examples that, you know, if you call that out early and it's a good risk transfer matrix, and just put the risk where it can be managed. Don't try to put it on someone who can't do it, or you're hoping someone can price it. That'll set you up for success, there's no doubt.
The answer you've given sort of ironically answers a question that Ursula Sanderlands just asked, which is, her question was, how do you recommend breaking down decision making that is political versus decision that is technical? And I think in some ways your discussion of risk transfer models, or the risk associated, is the way in which decisions become politicized or made for maybe the wrong technical reasons. Does that make sense? Have you guys got anything to add on that? Have you seen decision making that was leading to bad outcomes, perhaps on political reasons, or?
Of course.
Yeah, very relevant in the infrastructure sector, and Pete would have seen plenty of that as well. I mean, you know, the impact on a local community and its traffic might be a nonsensical decision from a project perspective, but if it gets the local member re-elected, it becomes political. I mean, that's as raw as it gets, and there are many examples of that style of conflict that owners have to manage. It's a very difficult and complex task for them, but it will lead to poor project delivery decisions. Yeah.
I mean, the reality is every project we do has a political portion of it, and you know, touching on community, stakeholders, external stakeholders, internal stakeholders. You know, every project, as a project, it's our role to drive a different outcome. And as a project manager, project director, it's our role to deal with that political information or political stop at the top end and keep it away from the bottom end. And that's how we try to manage as best we can.
So on, I guess, talking a little bit about project setup, that's a theme that both that everyone's sort of spoken about already. Bruce Lilford's asked a question. Thanks, Bruce. All good questions too here, by the way. He asks, how does the contracting strategy influence the relationships and outcomes of projects? And maybe I'll add to that, but what are the attributes that make projects contracting successful? What do we prefer to work under, I guess, is another way to ask the same question. Or what have you seen work in projects that's successful versus what tends to not be successful?
I know my experience would say that I've seen these successful projects across all of the contracting models. So I think it all does go back to what Brendan was saying earlier about, you know, how we set it up at the front end.
Yeah, 100%, Pete. I certainly wouldn't like people to go away thinking that Ausenco or contracting parties in this sector only want to have risk shared models. That's not right. Every project's different, every owner's different, their financing position is different, their outcomes are different. Some don't have to play to political interference or complexities, others do. And you know, there are some quite advanced execution risk matrices I had seen as governments. I've seen governments do it, and very large global oil and gas clients go through, and they weight that style of the external impact into the delivery of the job, and then break it down to really choose where they should go contractually. When I get confident on the success of the job is when I hear a customer saying they've been through that process. And where I worry is if some decision on contracting strategies is done on the back of, well, you know, I just want to get the price down, or I did it that way on the other job. They potentially may not be the right choice, I think, is what we're making. But there are times we at Ausenco, we love lump sum, right? Where we know a project, where we know a customer, when we've been involved in the study and someone trusts us, and we just come in, we'll start and finish it, black box, bow on top, we'll get in, get out. We love that, and are doing that as we speak. So, but that's not necessarily applicable to another job that some change might happen. And when change happens, you got to have flexibility and whatnot. So I think that's my answer. It's horses for courses. I think you get confident as a contractor when you know that's been thought of.
Yeah, I'll go along with that. Absolutely. There's no one size fits all, and where the project scope is very well defined between the parties, it's established that the likelihood of change is minimal. EPC or lump sum can be really successful, but it does depend on the nature of the project and the nature of the client. If the client is not particularly highly technically qualified, maybe EPC is the way to go, because he'll have little to contribute in an EPCM situation. Likewise, if the project is brownfields, the likelihood of change in that situation is much higher than in greenfields, and in that situation, EPCM is more likely to be the more viable approach. So it really is very much horses for courses. There's no one size fits all, and it's up to the engineer and the owner to really work out between them some common ground.
Very good. So I mean, so far we've spoken a bit about the people, the importance of people, working in teams, breaking down silos, early setup on projects. I want to pivot a little bit to talk a bit about systems and processes, and what does that mean for projects. What is the importance of systems, and what makes a good system versus a bad system? Peter, do you want to answer that one?
Well, systems are extremely important in what we do. Yeah, so we operate many systems throughout projects. I mean, projects are very complex, and anyone who thinks that projects aren't complex, then they need to rethink what they think of projects. I mean, we look at earned values, we look at all of the engineering systems from the front end through to construction systems, through to commissioning systems, and they need to flow right through. So yes, are they important? My word, they're important. Knowing your commodities, knowing your hours, knowing what people are doing. These are all systems that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and they allow us to report, track, understand, know where our project sits. So going to, like I mentioned before, going to some of the projects that I've been to that have had bad outcomes, have always lacked in systems. Always lacked in systems. So, we need to get our systems set up from day one and operate through the project.
Can they be too complicated sometimes, or too bureaucratic?
Yeah. We can we're engineers. Absolutely, we're engineers. We overcomplicate things a lot. We need to get back to simplicity.
Yeah, good point, Pete. Want to endorse that. And on the non-technical side, a cause for concern is increasingly complex, excuse me, workplace health and safety, HSE style systems too. I'll throw into the mix. These aren't the technical ones, but there have been some interesting cases for the courts that because our regulators in Australia anyway are very much focused on prosecutorial style. I mean, we don't have safety regulators to help us be better. They're out there typically, no disrespect, but they're legislated to apply penalties for breach. And sometimes our systems are designed to avoid the breach and therefore to avoid the penalties. They can be so complex that, what they say is a murmur at the top becomes loud, ridiculous noise at the bottom. So as something moves through the layers and organisation, we can create incredible complexity for the people that have to work with the system. So if it's paper-based, if it's constantly duplicative, all the things that make a system where humans will just not engage with it, that actually then has just created a massive risk that the whole thing was designed to avoid. So Pete's right on the technical side, but on the non-technical side, we have to be extremely careful about the systems we put in place and how they filter through to the people at the end of the day who've got to engage and use them.
Who's the audience? Who is the audience?
Yep. I mean, passing down to small tier contractors, an 80-page workplace health and safety risk profile, pre-qualification, that's floated someone's boat in a procurement department and has completely smashed some part of your supply chain who you want some sort of service from. That's the style of test I think that you've got to run against those systems. Yeah.
It's quite interesting that you talk about health and safety there, Brendan. We had a scenario not long ago where we had a high potential incident on the project, and it was a crane and a crane driver, so it was quite serious for us. what was interesting is the client came to us and said, oh, this was the procedure that this guy should have followed. Now, we're talking about a crane driver here. It was a 6-page procedure to operate in this zone, where it could have been compressed down to probably 1 or 2 paragraphs and put into plain English that the guy understood. So simplifying systems and understanding your audience is hugely important.
So Peter, can you rely on systems to give you the good outcomes, or do you need the people?
I think you have to have both. So, you know, if you've got good systems and good people, you're blessed. But the reality is on projects is, you know, we get people who we get in majority of the time, and Brendan touched on the top 5 there earlier. You know, if you've got good systems in place and you put all the accountabilities and all the clarity and you simplify things, people will perform. You know, I mean, I've seen it on so many projects where you walk into a project that's been there or might be going bad, and people go, oh, they're no good, this guy's no good, that guy's no good, and then you sit down with people and have the discussion about, and they go, oh, well, I didn't know about this and I didn't know about that, and then you get the clarity in there that Brendan spoke about earlier and what Chris touched on earlier, and you get that clarity and clear direction. People perform.
Yeah, when we were talking about this, your comments around your friend running McDonald's franchise was interesting in a sort of management versus systems versus people context. Do you want to give that little anecdote?
Yeah, well, I have a friend that operates a number of McDonald's stores, and you know, McDonald's stores, they all have the same systems in place. And each store that he has, they have different revenue different revenues and different outcomes. What's interesting about it is if he takes one manager out of one store and puts it into another store, the revenue changes, and it actually starts to change on the basis of the manager that's driving the system. Why? Because he drives a clarity, a simplicity to drive people to understand the systems and to get the outcomes that you require. And that is a good model because they are identical systems across all stores, but yet different people get the different outcomes.
Chris, you've seen systems change, particularly with regard to commissioning over the years. How have you seen that change, and what's your sort of comments? Has it improved the way we do things or not? Are we progressing? What works and what doesn't?
I think absolutely we do. But supporting the other guy's comments there, it's a combination of systems and people. One can't be expected to answer all the questions if you haven't got the other component. But just harking back to my early experience in Zambia, I was chucked onto this Chinese leaf plant and basically told to fix it, get it running. 2 years out of uni. Come on, guys. Really, I was essentially the commissioning manager, for God's sake. You know, I was 23. There was no structured system. There was no plan. There were minimal isolation procedures, random execution of tasks, and all complicated by ad hoc changes in direction from management. You know, so it was really a mess. That said, it was probably the most compelling experience of my early career, and as I said earlier, it set me on the path to what I've been doing for the rest of my life. But yeah, it was random. It was all over the place, and it was my job to try and pull some order out of this mess. If we go fast forward to my last commissioning job, which is now a few years ago, at Ikati Diamonds in Northwest Territories of Canada, we had the lot. We had a very, very detailed commissioning plan. We had commissioning procedures for the actual detail of what you go out there and do every day. We had general procedures which handled the interface between the client and the engineer. It managed the commissioning team's activities and pulled it all together. It had a very well structured stage-wise certification and handover process, all the way from construction verification to final handover. There's 6 levels of certification, any and all of which could be applied to individual modules within the process plant or areas within the plant comprising several modules. And we had very efficient, fairly informal, but efficient reporting. So we had a half-hour daily briefing straight after breakfast before we got into the actual day's work, where the commissioning manager briefed everybody. He showed an S-curve of progress from the previous day, discussed tasks that we'd achieved yesterday and what we were going to achieve today, and produced weekly and monthly reports and a final commissioning and handover report. At Ikati, we were mobilized on time. We took R&R on time. Everything happened according to the plan, and we demobilized on time and within budget. So, in my view, there's no question that commissioning has come of age. Now that's obviously a very personal journey, but I suspect that back in the 70s, it really was a bit of a cowboy show in many parts of the world, and hopefully the systems we now use. Oh, by the way, Ikati was a Fluor job, but the Fluor style of certification is very similar to what Ausenco now uses. So I think it's pretty much industry wide that we do have now systems that can and do dramatically assist in the process of commissioning. So just to wind up, you had in Zambia, you had a commissioning situation which was hazardous, unstructured, random, and used inexperienced personnel. At Ikati, it was safe, sequenced, predictable, and used experienced personnel. When I say predictable, that don't read boring. Commissioning is never boring. You're far, far too busy to get bored. So yeah, systems and people. Just
so it's faster, isn't it? I mean, yeah, fast, predictable, safe commissioning delivers value to the client early because you're not delayed. You're getting the plan up and running early, and it's performing as it needs to. So it talks to the NPV piece that Brendan and Peter were talking about earlier.
Yep.
There's a question here around sustainability, NPV and sustainability in designs. And we're doing some photos here, Peter. Do you want to talk a bit about how execution impacts sustainability?
Well, execution doesn't have to impact sustainability at all. When you have a look at our marine facility at Mina Gusta, we introduced buoys. We did a lot of work. We built a wharf. We've done an acid facility there. If you walk up the wharf during construction, we actually produced a haven for marine life. We have videos of schools of fish swimming around this facility whilst we were constructing. There is no impact, I believe, and my strong belief is sustainability doesn't have to impact NPV if we planned everything and engineered everything well.
Do you want to talk through some of these pictures here and how this relates to teams working together and project setup and some of the topics we've spoken about?
Yeah, look, this in actual fact, the the client project director is on this. So, this is an asset offloading facility which has potential for environmental impact, but there's a lot of safeties in this. I mean, you'll see a big reel up the end of the wharf where that's a hose that goes out about 400 metres. It's linked to a ship, and it's acid. It's sulfuric acid. It's a double skin thing that we've got leak detection on. And there's also a seawater uplift unit there, which goes 46 kilometres to the mine. There's also a power line that goes 46 kilometres to the mine. Up the back, you'll see some purple tanks, which are sulfuric acid storage facility, which is fully bunded off, membraned, and the impact towards the community, the marine life, and everything there has high potential. But this whole thing has worked so well that it's a picture, and you can see it in the background there. And this attributes to a client-contractor relationship. Also, this thing was designed in 3 different countries in the world. You know, it's a collaboration of many business units within the Ausenco team: pipeline business, the marine business, the construction business, the consultancy business. I mean, this is a total collaboration of not only the internal Ausenco stakeholders, the external as in our client. The community here had a lot to do with this. I mean, there's a town not far, a couple of kilometres from here, and they were concerned about the impacts of what was going on. So yeah, the collaboration to deliver something like this is an amazing story.
There's a couple more photos here. Peter, do you want to talk to these?
Yeah, okay. So we're looking at the sulphide plant there, which is the stacker, and I mean this project here was both. Well, it is both oxide and sulphide. This is the sulphur area, and I think that is the screening. It is the screening there, and the surge bin down the other end. A very remote area in Peru, as you can see, very barren. Over 4,000 people at its peak. And we operated this. We have achieved approximately 20% of the project through COVID, and we've sustained a reasonably good productivity of the project. The client, as far as we know, is extremely happy with the outcome. I mean, the 2 CEOs of Ausenco and the client met only about a week ago, and they showed their appreciation of how the project has run to date. So all of this fits into everything that we're talking about now, as far as I'm concerned, where, you know, we talk about collaboration, we talk about clarity, we talk about teams, we talk about communities. All of these things come together over a very difficult period, and we have been able to deliver an outstanding outcome for our client on this one.
Pretty sizable site there for sure. Fair bit going on. I'll open the floor up to see if there's any more questions. Given we've only got a few minutes left, so if you've got any left, feel free to continue asking. There's a comment I've got here from Diego Saraceto. And look, he's I think just affirming a lot of what we've been saying. He says that I think that systems and processes help having a single set of data that allows us to make the right decisions. And having successful projects is having the right people at the right time making the right decisions. I think that's definitely one of the management lessons that you'll probably read in most of the textbooks, I think, and Google searches you talked about, Brendan. He says, think we should train people more to understand the business model. And I guess that context is, well, how making quick decisions actually helps the business case and MPV. So very much agree there, and how using the systems correctly can protect the business and the owner. So there's quite a few thoughts there.
If I can just jump in there, Diego is the project director on our current project at Mina Gusta. And he's the guy I spoke about earlier about making quite a substantial change and difference to the project for collaboration of teams between client and contractor. So yeah, he has a lot to do with the success of this project with us.
Thanks, Diego. Apologies for not recognising that. Nice to meet you.
I just call out a very interesting point contained in there was single use of data. Now this is the nirvana that I think we're all striving for, and where you look at the development of designs and the whole of data management, I think everyone's trying to do that. But I just want to call that out as an absolute critical pursuit. The multiple repositories of data is a massive barrier to systems integration. We all know that. And more I'm seeing the tech, I mean, where we're going with a lot of both our engineering and our project management tools is fundamental based data that is then available to a range of different systems, so you can rely on the integrity of that, and then you've got confidence in decision making. So the point Diego makes about that is very, very relevant.
I'm sure Chris will have something to say about single data when it comes to commissioning and handover.
Absolutely. In fact, if we can go back to the continuity that we all agreed would be very helpful to any project, having the continuity from study all the way through to commissioning. My firm belief is that when we come to the end of detailed design, we should immediately embark on a commissioning plan. That is to say, commissioning of the process plant as a series of modules which fit into a series of areas which make up the whole. Now, the actual process of drawing up procedures for each individual area and module within a process plant, in my view, it takes the form of a check on your design. Because if you can be halfway through drawing out these procedures and find that, oh, you can't do this because we haven't got that. So you can go back and immediately modify your design. It might be the addition of a valve or some other device. But that closes the loop. And when you refer through your commissioning procedures back to all the process design documentation, that makes sure that your data sources are all aligned and singular, so that any confusion that might, or inconsistencies in the design, are actually flushed out in the simple process of drawing up procedures for commissioning.
And I think that's a neat way to probably tie up, realizing that we're coming close to time here, but to tie up how what the future looks like in terms of project development, having these systems that sort of pull everything together, one single source of data, as you were talking about, Brendan and Diego, and becoming more efficient in the way we do things. So I guess just very briefly to recap what we've spoken about, we did cover off some discussions on busting silos, how important human capital is, early setup of projects, sort of theme throughout the discussion, keeping things simple, systems and processes fit for purpose, single points of data, problem solving in teams, and ultimately getting all that right means you're not in the 60-odd% of failed projects. You're a successful project, and you're safer, faster, and higher net present value. So that basically wraps up today's discussion. Thank you everyone for your attendance, and really appreciate the questions for those that asked them, and I hope everyone got something interesting out of today. I certainly did. Hope you enjoyed the session, and feel free to follow up with any questions, and thank you to AusIMM for hosting this today. And
Thanks,
thank you
everyone.
to Chris, Brendan and Peter. I almost forgot the panelists. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you very much, Matt. I would now like to bring the webinar to a close. So yeah, thank you for attending. Thank you, Matt, Brendan, Peter, and Chris for the session. To the attendees, we hope you found the presentation insightful, and you'll join us for future AusIMM webinars. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.